it's fantastic to be here. Israel, thank you for being flexible and swapping the times, and thank you for not minding that happening. It was kind of my fault, but also just got completely stumped by the parking, and they wouldn't take I kept trying to put the details in and it wouldn't accept it, and so everything went wrong. But anyway, I'm here, and that's great. And thank you for not minding. I feel I ought to apologise, actually, for hitting you with such a huge couple of topics and issues at this time of the day. I feel that maybe you might be needing a bit of light relief now, rather than going into this. When I looked at the title, I was like, oh my goodness, this is a bit of a serious one, isn't it? With a couple of huge issues, much of which actually relates very much to what Israel was talking about, because the linking in with issues of race are pretty clear, and with gender too, but I'm not going to unpack that now. What we're going to be looking at is the role of the local church when it comes to these huge issues. And I want to tell you about a few of them. Let me tell you about Gateway Church in Leeds. These lovely people here at the bottom, they are from Gateway Church in Leeds. They have about 150 adult members. Before 2020, they weren't really doing anything environmental-wise. But then early in 2020, their elders agreed that making a faithful, godly response to the climate and to ecological issues needed to become a priority for them as a church, that they felt that it was part of them loving Jesus. And so in July of 2020, they held their first Sunday service on the theme. And after that, they introduced a regular item into their online bulletin and gave practical hints for different lifestyle things that they could do. They signed up to a Roche's Eco-Church scheme. They planned a Creation Sunday event. They got involved with a Tearfund resource called the Climate Emergency Toolkit, which helps a church declare a climate emergency and then take action from there. And from that, they now have a group, an eco team of 23 people who are in sub-teams, and they're looking at different areas across their church life. They've got involved in campaigning. They've written to their local MP and to their councillors on particular local issues. One of those was around Bradford Airport, and their elders wrote formally against the proposal to expand Leeds and Bradford Airport. They've got a monthly creation care prayer meeting. So you can see they're now pretty involved just from the last 2 years, all through the time of the pandemic, amazingly. There's another church, Eternal Faith Church in India. And although I don't have a picture of the church, this bottom picture actually comes from them. Pastor Sunil founded the church near Delhi in India, and he has introduced a whole load of practical ways for his congregation to get involved and learn more about creation care. They have worked with an organisation called Ekklesia that we partner with as Tearfund, and we resource them. And under the pastor's leadership, the church has planted a kitchen garden, and I think this is a picture of some of the things that they've planted, as well as they've been teaching and encouraging their church members to plant their own kitchen gardens. They've set up a tree plantation drive, and together they've planted 800 trees, which is really important for them, as that helps stop erosion and flooding, which are two big problems facing people in India living in rural areas. The church has moved away from single-use items, moved away from disposables, and now uses things that they can wash up and use again. They've taken steps to reduce their electricity usage. And as well as working in his own church, Pastor Sunil also uses his influence around other local churches too. In the Manyoni district in central Tanzania, they have no electricity, and power is a real problem for them. No power means no light, and being right on the equator, it means that 12 hours of every day is in darkness for them. The alternative to darkness is to use charcoal or kerosene lamps or candles, all of which is really damaging to their health and also destroys the natural world. And it's expensive. But despite the problems with it, about 90% of energy used in Tanzanian households comes from firewood and charcoal. I've actually been to that area and saw the impact of the charcoal use with the area just denuded of trees. And because of that, as well as global climate change, they were experiencing local climate change. No trees means no rain, and they were living with a really severe drought. The diocese there, the Anglican Church Diocese of the Rift Valley, has been working with Tearfund to help with solar panels to help communities switch to renewable energy. One of the things we do at Tearfund is we help churches and communities set up self-help groups, which are savings schemes that communities can do together. And group members save up to pay for half of the cost of a solar lighting system. And when they've got half of it, they're then given the system so they can start experiencing the benefits of it. And then as they continue to save up, they then over time pay off the whole cost of it. And they're really enjoying the benefits of having electricity. It means that education improves because the children can now do their homework after 6 o'clock. It means that women who go into labour at night are now able to give birth with light rather than in the dark. And so maternity death has decreased and so on and so on. And as they're cutting down less charcoal, so it's having a really positive effect on the local area and on deforestation rates. The picture at the top here is from City Church in Sheffield. They're actively involved in welcoming refugees into their church community. They do that through an initiative called Welcome Boxes, run by Welcome Churches, which is a great organisation to have a look at. For example, there was a family that had just arrived in Sheffield. The mum and the children had arrived on a particular day through the government's reuniting scheme, and they had absolutely nothing. So the church arranged for some people to go out and visit them and take them clothes and toiletries, toys for the kids, food and all the different things that they needed, which then led to some great friendships between that family and others in the church. From that, the church has now got really involved in welcoming refugees. There are some in the church who love walking and climbing in the Peak District, and who knew? People from other countries enjoy doing that too. And so it's a great way for some of those who've come in as refugees to be able to do the things that they love doing and to go walking and hiking as well. There's a football club on a Monday evening, and that's been a really good way for getting to know some of the men and getting them involved. They have a group called Food and Stories, which I think pretty much speaks for itself, really, where people come and eat together and share their food and then also share their stories. And they share Bible stories too, so they learn together in that way. And then up above here comes from a church run by Pastor Jose in Colombia. And Pastor Jose is one of many pastors from a number of churches across Colombia who are reaching out to Venezuelan refugees. As Tearfund, we've been working with a local partner in Colombia, helping to equip Colombian churches, encouraging them to make their churches a safe space for migrant women particularly, and helping them set up trauma healing groups. Tearfund, through the local partner, we've trained more than 100 church leaders, including Pastor Jose, to become trauma healing facilitators in 30 churches across Colombia. And these groups are now supporting hundreds of Venezuelan migrant women. So these are just some examples, and I could go on and on and on and on telling you wonderful stories of local churches in the UK and around the world who are involved with, engaged in the climate crisis and in responding to the vast needs of refugees. These two issues are huge, aren't they? We face massive challenges with this. And in the time I've got, I can't hope to do justice and really go into the depth of the climate crisis that we face and issues around refugees. But we face massive crises in these two areas. At Tearfund, we hear every day how the climate crisis is devastating the lives of people living in poverty. With extreme weather events, droughts and floods and fires, crops are being ruined, people are losing their homes, children aren't able to go to school, people are losing their incomes and their livelihoods. This picture here is from northern Kenya. In early 2017, there was a crippling drought there that the pastoral communities that lived there were just devastated. I mean, I don't need to give words, do I, to the picture that you can see there. And we've been working through a local partner called Food for the Hungry, helping to build a mobile health clinic and a nutrition program, as well as emergency water trucking in order to help the pastoral communities there. Climate change is devastating the lives of millions of people around the world. In 2016, we saw world hunger increase for the first time in a decade. Until 2016, we'd been doing really well as a world on that vital poverty indicator of world hunger. And in 2016, for the first time, we saw it increase. Climate change being one of the key drivers of that, alongside conflict. And of course, climate and conflict are very closely linked. And this is an issue of justice. The poorest 3.5 billion people in our world are responsible for only 10% of global emissions. It takes oh, don't worry, sorry, you can stick on the same one, thanks. It takes a person, an average person in the UK, it takes them 6 days to emit the same amount of CO2 as it takes the average person in Malawi to emit in a whole year. And the climate crisis isn't only, say only in inverted commas, impacting the poorest people. It is and it will impact all of us. You just have to think of the wildfires in California and Australia, the flooding that actually Australia is experiencing now in the northeast and Western Europe experienced, and the heat dome in Canada. This is something that will impact all of us. And then when it comes to the refugee crisis, this image here is from a camp in Nigeria for people, internally displaced persons. And this is just showing the children who queue up first. They eat largely noodles and soup. They receive their lunch first, and then the adults queue up after them. The refugee crisis is, I hardly know where to start with that. And that's where, if we go on to the next slide, I don't know if you'll be able to read the statistics, but you will, won't you? But I just wanted to put a few statistics up It's horrifying. But this first one in every 95 people in the world is an asylum seeker, a refugee, or an IDP. Excuse me. Now, I've been speaking on these issues for a while, and I used to say that 1 in every 110 people, and that was a pretty terrible statistic. And then when I looked at it again for this talk, it's now got to 1 in every 95 people. And I won't go through it all. You can read it, and I can see some of you taking pictures to have a look at it again later. But it's just interesting seeing where are refugees coming from, where are they being hosted, and to get a sense of that. And to remember that the majority of refugees are hosted in developing world countries. And then this final statistic down the end, 47,000 attempted channel crossings to the UK took place last year. So the statistics are horrendous, aren't they? And we know that we're facing a fresh wave now. We're facing this issue again with Ukraine. It's estimated that around 800,000 people have fled the country so far. And people think it could go up to 4 million. Numbers vary depending on what you read. But we are facing a refugee crisis now in Europe. And climate and refugees are very linked as well. So it's not just a climate crisis here and a refugee crisis there. These things are linked. As the global climate crisis worsens, an increasing number of people are being forced to leave their homes as they search for places where they can live, as they search for habitable land, places with less extreme weather. All of the things that the climate crisis brings, drought and monsoons, hurricanes and floods, have increased in particular regions in the planet, forcing people to leave. We haven't yet actually got a status officially called climate refugees, though they are often called that. But we know that climate refugees are increasing, and they don't yet have an official status given them like refugees of war. But we know that the links are there, and we know that the numbers are increasing. So then how do we respond to this as local churches? Well, the first thing I want to say is that I hope it's obvious that we do have to respond. That there is a calling on us and a responsibility on us to respond. These issues aren't issues out there that have no bearing on us as Christians, as followers of Jesus. Actually, the issues that they provoke go right to the heart of the Christian faith. They go right to the heart of what it means to be a Christian. There is so much biblically that would call us to respond to both these issues. I haven't got the time to give you a full biblical exposition on that, but let me just highlight 2 particular areas. We worship a God of justice, a God who calls us to take care of people in need. If we can bring up Deuteronomy 10. He calls us to defend the cause of the fatherless and the widow and to love the foreigner residing among you. I've actually just been preaching on Deuteronomy 26 for the Church of England's online service going out on Sunday. And that also says we give our first fruits so that the foreigner residing among you has what they need. We are called to be generous. There are so many passages that I could pull out, but we worship a God of justice who calls us to take care of people in need. And we worship a God of justice who is the Lord of all creation. This next verse from Colossians 1:19-20, Jesus' blood was shed on the cross, not only to reconcile people to God, but to reconcile all things to God. If in our understanding of the gospel we only talk about people, that's a really important part of the gospel, but we have an emaciated gospel. We're missing out on the fullness of the gospel if we're only talking about people. God loves all that he has made. It was very good. And Jesus' blood shed on the cross was to reconcile all things to God. Oh, so much I wish I had the time to explore around that with you, but I'm not going to. I'm going to leave it there. So how do we respond? Well, I hope it's obvious that we have to respond. And then what can we do? Let's teach and raise awareness on these issues. Let's be talking about the refugee crisis. Let's bring into our Sundays and into our church groups discussion around what it means to welcome the stranger, to be a welcoming church. Let's talk about the climate crisis. Let's talk about environmental care. For too long, that hasn't featured in our churches. I'm really pleased to say that that is shifting and changing, which is hugely encouraging. But let's help our church congregation to see that caring for the wider natural world is an integral part of the good news of Jesus Christ and of what we are called to do. So let's teach and raise awareness. Let's pray. We need to pray. We need to pray for these crises. We need to pray for the climate. We need to pray. You will know today is a global day of prayer for you. Sure, in various ways you've been praying on your own or with your church congregation. Hundreds of us at Tearfund, we went on an online call this morning and we prayed together. So let's not forget to pray. Prayer undergirds everything that we do. Let's give. Let's give to organisations that are working in these areas. At Tearfund, we need supporters to be generous because we're able to use that money then to support the kind of work and the sort of partners that I've mentioned earlier. When people give to Tearfund, it doesn't get stuck in a big office. It goes out and goes directly to the communities that we serve. And for organisations working with refugees, let's use our money generously. There are all sorts of ways now by which we can give to help Ukraine. We've put some links up on the Tearfund on the homepage. You'll see it there. Let's be generous. Let's give. Let's speak up. Let's use our voices to bring about change. On climate, we need to campaign. We need to call our governments and our world governments and business leaders to put in place policies and practices that work in favour of taking care of the world and work in favour of the world's poor. And through campaigning on refugee issues, we can speak out against the things that are stopping people escaping war and torture and persecution and stopping people reaching the UK to start a new life and be with their families. We need to let the UK and our government know that we want them to welcome refugees, that refugees are welcome here, that they have a lot to contribute. And we need safe and legal ways for them to reach safety. So we can join organisations that will help us with that, help us to speak out. And let's take action in our own lives. Let's take action in how we live, reducing our carbon footprint, reducing our emissions, living more lightly in our lives, and take action with with refugees. We can volunteer in our churches. We can get in touch with the local authority. We can find ways to be engaged in some of the ways that I mentioned earlier with those churches. Again, a huge amount more information I could give you about how we could take action, but I want to finish by pointing you to some resources, which I hope will then give you more that you can do for the taking action. With climate resources, check out Eco Church. Will pretty much give you everything that you need as a church to get engaged on climate and environmental care. And have a look at Tearfund's Climate Emergency Toolkit, which again has got great resources and takes you through a kind of journey as a church. And then when it comes to refugees, I've put up some organisations. If we can go on to the next slide, brilliant, thank you. those organisations will be really helpful for you. They have so much on their website. I wish I could talk about it more. They have so much on their different websites of different things that you can be doing and examples and stories. So do just take a picture of that slide and take a bit of time having a look at those organisations and seeing the things that they're doing, which will then inspire you and give you the ideas for what you can be doing. And then finally, I've been very cheeky and put up some of my books, 3 of which you can find on the book table. Would love you to explore the biblical side more. These actually cover both environmental issues, and refugees come into that as well. Possibly, I'm not going to go through all of those because I know I need to finish and get you into discussion groups. Possibly the one I'm most excited about is Planet Protectors, which is a children's book that I've written with the comedian and BBC scriptwriter Paul Carenza. Brilliant for the kids in your church. Do have a look. And then L is for Lifestyle is a really practical book, and Saying Yes to Life is a rich book that will give you the opportunity to explore these issues in more depth. So I hope that gives you lots of ideas, lots of resources, lots of ways by which you as local churches can be responding to the climate crisis and to the global refugee crisis that we are facing today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruth.